being the fastest quarterback you've never seen. I'll be right back. There's no quicker way to get into DFS. Play Super Draft today and see for yourself.
We're behind. They're all fired up. What we got to do? First place, our defense has got to go out there and take the ball. Then when we get the ball, we got to have 11 people that's going to do their job and try to score every time you get the football. If we do that, we'll be all right. That will be all right.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Football University with me, Matt Caddell. We had a crazy weekend. If you're figuring out, we had a crazy football weekend started today. I mean, happy Monday. I know we had crazy Lamar news. We had Pro Day this past weekend. Bryce Young, all the quarterbacks, Will Levis, C.J. Stroud. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Gibbs. We're going to talk about the Alabama receivers. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to find a way to bring it back to Alabama. So RTR to all the Bama fans out there here at Football University. I mean, thanks for joining me, Matt Caddell. And sorry, I'm just trying to get my settings squared away. Oh, how about that? Okay, good. Are we good? Are we good? Okay, good. All right. So, Football University, happy Monday. We got the camera situated. We got roll ties, RTRs. Like I said, we got a lot of topics, but I want to start with Bama football. You know, we got spring training. RTR to all the fans in the student section, Cindy Reed, Lori Caddell, William Bryan, Todd Colbert. Speaking of Alabama football, let's start with probably the greatest quarterback to ever come through Tuscaloosa. I'm going to start with Bryce Young. I mentioned it earlier, Bryce Young having the pro day last Thursday. You knew it was going to be interesting. If you tune in to last week's show, I talk about the different dynamic, the chess match between certain teams. But I want to talk about it from this standpoint. I'm looking at the teams at the top of the draft, and Bryce has his pro day on Thursday, and I'm looking at it as an arms race perspective. You know how, teams are trying to outdo each other, and I think two teams that have separated themselves at the top of the draft, you look at the Carolina Panthers, Frank Wright, them acquiring a lot of talent, Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, they just re-signed Bradley Bozeman. So Bryce Young, I think these teams are really going up there trying to get their quarterback. You know, they had Bryce last Wednesday taking him out to dinner. I mean, it was probably, 10 or 12 people. I heard Bryce had the scallops and the salad, and staying healthy. But I think he blown everybody away there at that dinner. So Carolina Panthers, I think they are trying to position themselves for Bryce Young at that number one pick. So I had to bring that up. Also, another team I think that's separating themselves for Bryce Young, possibly. We always talk about the Houston Texans, D'Amico Ryans, Laramie Tunsil. I think also there, but another sneaky team, the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know if you saw at the pro day, Pete Carroll, his staff, they were in Tuscaloosa meeting with Coach Saban. Coach Saban saying, hey, listen, we met with all the top guys. I was thinking maybe, they're there for Will Anderson. Maybe they trade up for Will Anderson, but you never know how this draft situation might go. So wouldn't be surprised if the Seattle Seahawks, listen, they took a selfie tweet with Bryce Young. I mean, it gets the mind rolling. You're thinking about Russell Wilson. You're thinking about Bryce Young, that comparison in Cincinnati. Pete Carroll, Coach Saban. Coach Saban and him and Pete Carroll probably had a lot of conversations regarding Bryce and Will Anderson, and probably some other players like a Jordan Battle, Brian Branch, trying to get their roster squared away. So the Seattle Seahawks, I thought they came out of that pro day looking quite interesting. They signed Geno Smith to that extension, but they're in the sweepstakes. I wouldn't be surprised if they are looking at Bryce Young. So I had to bring that up. That was like my first two teams, the Carolina Panthers. And, last week I talked about, for me, Bryce Young is still number one uno on my quarterback board. But I want to shift dynamics. Going back to the Carolina Panthers, you look, C.J. Stroud, you had three quarterbacks last week. C.J. Stroud, Ohio State on Wednesday. Bryce Young's pro day on Thursday. Will Levis pro day on Friday. You look at those three quarterbacks. You look at the Carolina Panthers. They were there at C.J. Stroud. So then they flew down to Tuscaloosa. And I got to say, to me, the player that impressed the most was Bryce Young. You look at Steve Smith, future NFL Hall of Famer. He's there with David Tepper, Frank Wright, Jim Caldwell, all those brands. They were able to be at both pro days. They were able to be at Stroud's as well as Bryce Young. And Steve Smith basically said Bryce Young did everything over and beyond to be the number one pick. And, he played for the Carolina Panthers. So, he's probably, kind of doing a little recruiting. I'm not going to say tampering or anything like that. But listen, the Carolina Panthers, I think they were very impressed. You saw the owner hugging Bryce Young before his workout, the owner's wife, one of the owners of the Carolina Panthers. So, Frank Wright, they seemed like they had more of a business conversation, but it looked pretty interesting. So I'm saying the Carolina Panthers, Bryce, you might be a Carolina Panther at the end of the day. So let's get to the student section while we are in here. I heard the Seahawks are talking with Bryce Young. Yeah, I draw the Bryce Young, Russell Wilson comparisons. Listen, they won a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson. Bryce is an West Coast guy. I mean, you circumvent, you interject Bryce Young with the Seattle Seahawks. That they probably already have the best quarterback in that division. You look at Brock Purdy with the 49ers. You look at Kyle Shanahan, how they won that division. That could be so interesting dynamic. So let's stay in the student section. We got a lot of RTRs in here. William Brown says, we got some RTRs. Let's get to my next top. Let's stay in the student section. The only thing the NFL is looking at, Bryce height. They can't get past that until they see him play a game. Yeah, I think some teams are still going to be concerned about his height. Me, it's no concern. To me, it goes back to the film. I've been saying this weeks and weeks and weeks, consecutively here at Football University, talking about how dynamic of a playmaker Bryce Young is. And since we're talking about Bryce Young, this brought me to my next topic about Bryce Young. You look at Bryce Young, if he goes to the Carolina Panthers, I think he has a Drew Brees type impact in that NFC South division. You look at Drew Brees, the impact he had with the New Orleans Saints, winning them a Super Bowl. I think you look at Bryce, if he comes to Carolina, Atlanta has uncertainty at the quarterback position. The Saints have Derek Carr. The Panthers automatically, when Bryce Young, if he's the quarterback, I think he has the Drew Brees type of impact. And I say that with the comparison of Bryce's type of style of play. Getting the ball out fast, not the tallest guy, but he's super accurate. He can will a team to the Super Bowl. And I think Bryce Young could win 1 or 2 Super Bowls in the NFL. But yes, I think they have to put the right pieces, the right system in place for the Bryce Young to be successful. Offensive line, solid defense, but you got to have weapons. They just signed DJ Shark from the Detroit Lions, so they're trying to put places in place for that rookie quarterback to be successful. So, if you hear people say, listen, Bryce Young, his height, and the first thing they say is Kyler Murray, I say, listen, that person probably doesn't know football. I think those are 2 different types of quarterback. And if you hear Bryce Young comparison, the first thing they say is Baker Mayfield, you need to turn the other way. These guys have no clue what they're talking about. To me, if Bryce Young should be comparable to Drew Brees, I think Bryce is going to have a Drew Brees type impact in that division in the NFC South. So let's get we talked about Bryce Young. Let's get to the student section. William Brown has a great question. He says, has anyone picked up Derrick Henry yet? As of right now, Derrick Henry is a Tennessee tight end, still in Nashville, but there were some rumors out saying, they got Ron Carthon, the new GM, one of the few African-American GMs. Shouts out to him. But, yes, they did. News kind of broke a couple weeks ago saying they were shopping around Derrick Henry. You're hearing rumors about, maybe possibly pairing him up with Philadelphia, with Jalen Hurts. Or Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. So as of right now, he's still a Tennessee Titan. But big story today, Lamar Jackson said he wants to be traded. Well, he told the Baltimore Ravens March 2nd he wanted to request a trade, and Harbaugh had to go have a press conference at the NFL meeting in Arizona today, right? Like 2 minutes before that story broke. So interesting dynamic. The Ravens organization, Lamar Jackson, hearing all this crazy stuff. The odds for Lamar Jackson, I'm going to pause right here with Lamar Jackson because he's that dynamic of a player. The initial odds I saw of his next team were probably the Colts. I think the Colts have the biggest odds. You look at Jim Irsay. They have the number 4 pick in the draft, I believe. Do you want to get an AR-15, or would you rather have a Lamar Jackson? You look at Jim Irsay, the owner, Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator coming from the Philadelphia Eagles. You think about the Philadelphia Eagles, the success they had with Jalen Hurts, and you can only imagine him trying to emulate that success with the Lamar Jackson up there in the AFC South. I think that could present a lot of problems. They're going to be playing Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, so you still get that matchup. But, man, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, I think you have to pull the trigger on Lamar. I know if I would, and I think give me another team. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, I know we got a lot of Falcons fans out there. Rise up. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, man, you haven't had a splash hire at the quarterback position since Michael Vick. Could you imagine having Lamar Jackson, the type of impact culturally, energy, enthusiasm within the city, of Atlanta, hot Atlanta, the way they like to run the ball, downhill with the running back, I think that game fits Lamar Jackson. So, listen, I said the Colts, I said the Falcons, and I give you another sneaky team. I would say the Commanders, but I think the Commanders are, I don't know, I think they got a lot of issues with ownership, all that good stuff. I think that would be a great fit for him with Eric Bieniemy. If that was me, Ron Rivera, listen, Baltimore's not that far from Washington, D.C. I'm at Lamar Jackson's doorstep if I'm the Washington Commanders, telling him to come over there. But if you look at another team, I said the Colts. I think another team, maybe the New England Patriots. Are they happy with Mac Jones, Bill Belichick coming out today in the coaches meeting, NFL meetings today talking about, Mac Jones got to compete, which is typical Belichick, Saban, you know how it is. But interesting comments. Do you think they will put in all the money? Robert Kraft, Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator, you think they will put money into having Lamar Jackson? But I don't know if they do that. I do think they might stick with Mac Jones. But, you know, if he does come in that division, he's already one of the top quarterbacks in that division, the AFC East. And you get Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. I mean, that's the most talked about division. So, yeah, I had to touch that. So, let's stay here. A lot of William Bryce says, I got a friend up here who wants Harbaugh and Lamar to leave. Laugh out loud. You know, my biggest things, you know, Ravens fans, Ravens flock, I feel bad for you to hear the news that Lamar wants to leave. But I think Baltimore, I think Harbaugh, he might have some blame to do with it. You know, the cost of the new GM. I think if Ozzie Newsome, shouts out to Ozzie Newsome, if he was still the GM, I think all this would have been kind of ironed out. You know, I think players have so much respect for Ozzie. Ozzie, I think, would know how to, you know, communicate with the players and make sure you get the right deal. But we're at the situation that we have now, and I think Harbaugh might have some blame to do with it, just because you look at the offensive style. You know, they put weapons around him, but the offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, I don't know if he was the best, but I mean, the guy did win an MVP. So we got a comment. Lori Caddell says, "Rise up." But it will be interesting to see. Listen, if I'm the Falcons, listen, go and get Lamar. Like, this is what we do at Football University. Falcons, call me if you need any type of consulting help with your football team. Listen, I would tell you to go to get Lamar Jackson. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, go get Lamar Jackson. So we got a few Roll Tide rolls in the student section. RTR, William Bryant. Let's see. Great point. You bring me to my next topic, Jeff Stapleton. Thank you. Will Anderson visited the Houston Texans, said DeMeco was really impressed with him. Listen, you know, I talked about DeMeco. I mentioned how I think the Seattle Seahawks, Pete Carroll, Coach Saban was really vetting, you know, really getting some good questions, trying to understand more of these top players. You know, Coach Saban had a great quote talking about, listen, we expect Will Anderson and Bryce Young to be at the top of those draft, and we've talked with basically the 4 teams that have the top 4 picks. So, you know, just talking about the talent Will Anderson has. You know, I think right now Will Anderson is an Arizona Cardinal, but I mentioned Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade up to go get Will Anderson. You look at that division. You look at what the San Francisco 49ers have, Nick Bosa, Greenlaw, that vaunted defense. You know, Seattle, when they had their success, they had the Legion of Boom. You know, they're trying to shoe up that front 4. So you have Will Anderson up there in Seattle with the 12th man. You know, that could get pretty scary. So it'll be interesting to see. So Will Anderson, I think you're Arizona Cardinal, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're a Seattle Seahawk. So let's stay in the student section. Y'all are keeping me on my topics. So let's stay right here. 60 says, I think Jahmyr Gibbs will go early in the top of the draft. Your thoughts, Matt? I do think it will be at least 2 running backs coming off in the board early in the draft. I think, you know, Bijan Robinson, I think his sweepstakes start at pick 9 with the Chicago Bears. I know the Philadelphia Eagles have the number 10 pick, but I think if you look at the Chicago Bears, what they want to do, they traded out the number 1 pick down to number 9. I think they're looking to put pieces around Justin Fields. If I'm the GM, listen, Chicago hadn't had a running back in so long. So I think you look at Bijan Robinson at number 9 because if you pass on him, I think the Philadelphia Eagles, if they don't go Brian Branch, I could easily see them going Bijan Robinson, pairing him with the Jalen Hurts. That could do a lot of damage in that NFC division. So with that being said, I do think Bijan Robinson is off the board at 10, 10, 12, 13, 14 is in the teens. And I think that pushes Jahmyr Gibbs stock up to upper 20s, 25, 26. You look at the Buffalo Bills at 27. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs at 30. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles at 31, 32. I think all those teams could be in the sweepstakes. You look at the Denver Broncos. I mean, that could be a sneaky move. You look at Sean Payton, what he likes to do with athletic, shifty running backs, the success he had with Alvin Kamara. You cut on the tape. You look at Jahmyr Gibbs. You can make those parallels. So I do think Jahmyr Gibbs comes off in the early situation, but I think he needs to be in a system where they have a good offensive line, but they have a good running back by committee. You look at the Chiefs, they can still feed Pacheco, but they can change it up and put Jahmyr Gibbs in, outside zone situation, passing situations, give Patrick Mahomes another type weapon. So great comment about Jahmyr Gibbs. And this is another point I want to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. The reason why he's one of the top 2 running backs, go look at the Alabama-Texas game. To me, that was probably one of the biggest games of the year, talent-wise. I thought Bijan Robinson put on a clinic that game. Bryce Young put on the clinic that game. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs put on the clinic that game with the running ability, catching ability. He did a lot of great things. So to me, those are my top 2 running backs. And I say, just go back and look at the Texas game. And all these Bryce Young naysayers out there that's saying, oh, he's not that great, tell them to cut on the Texas games. Tell them to cut on the Tennessee games. It's so much film out there to watch about Bryce Young. So let's stay in the student section. Wayne Bryan brings up a good question. Says, where do you see Mechie going, Matt? First, Mechie had, I believe, leukemia last year. I think he's recovering. So we wish him the best. We continue to pray for him. Pray that he gets better in that situation. But, he's with the Houston Texans. We mentioned D'Amico Ryans, bringing in Will Anderson. If you're D'Amico Ryans, he said today at the NFL meetings in Arizona, they're bringing in Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud for, home visits, team visits, official team visits. And if you're D'Amico Ryans at number 2, you probably thinking you're going to get C.J. Stroud because I don't see Carolina. I think if you want to get Bryce Young, you got to come to number 1. But, if you're Houston Texans, I think you're kind of happy with C.J. Stroud. But if the Carolina Panthers fumble this and draft C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryans probably got to be one of the happiest guys on the earth. All of Houston Texans fans, all of H-Town, they will be elated to have Bryce Young at number 2. So, but yeah, it will be interesting. But I say that about Bryce. I think Bryce will be throwing the Mechie. I do think the Texans will get another receiver playmaker at number 12, whether it's a receiver out of Ohio State, Jordan Addison, all those type of guys. So, I do think if Bryce Young goes to the Texans, he'll be throwing back the Mechie like he was in Tuscaloosa, to answer your question. William Bryant. So, let's stay in the student section for a second before I go to my next topic. So we talked about Gibbs. We talked about the Texas game. We talked about the Bryce Young arms race. I said the Carolina Panthers, Seattle Seahawks could be a sneaky team. But I want to go back to the pro day, and I want to talk about how Coach Saban, even though I mentioned him having good conversation, and it was interesting to see some of the interactions between the NFL coaches and the Alabama staff. And one thing that stood out to me, because this is what we do here at Football University, we talk about anything and everything football. Sneaky good picture together, good conversation, which I thought was really good. Dan Quinn and Coach Saban, and Dan Quinn and Coach Steele. You look at Dan Quinn's defense. I mean, I hope Coach Steele, they were able to trade off defensive ideas. I was glad to see that because I think Kevin Steele is a good defensive older guy. He knows about top defenses, and to see him and Dan Quinn interact, I think that goes a long way. I know Dan Quinn's has history with Coach Saban, I believe, in the past. But to have Dan Quinn, you look at the impact he had on the Dallas Cowboys defense. They're one of the tops in the league. So I think having Kevin Steele is going to have that type of impact. So to see those guys interacting, I think that was great for, coaches to see and players to see. It got me excited. We talked about Pete Carroll. So we talked about Bryce Young and Bryce Young's pro day. And I know I talked about Bryce Young, Drew Brees comparison and the Panthers, but I want to talk about Bryce Young's pro day. And if you didn't notice, Bryce Young had, he did about 45, 50 throws in front of teams last Thursday. It's well scripted. And his receivers that he had, he had Jermaine Burton, Ja'Cory Brooks, Malik Benson, Slade Bolden, Cameron Latou, and I believe Jahmyr Gibbs. It was okay. I think Bryce was, I think that's who we probably been working with. But I'm going to start with the positive stuff first. Malik Benson, I think he's going to be that receiver for us this year. He looked like a smooth route runner who was out there with Bryce. The little that I saw, he looked confident, catching the hands, good hand-eye coordination, smooth route runner. He had the intricacies to be successful. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but Malik Benson, and it just made me think about, man, I wish we had him last year. Malik Benson, I can only imagine how good we would have been offensively if we could have used him at receiver. But, yeah, I think Malik Benson is going to be that guy for this year for Alabama's success. So I just want to pause there. And I'm going to set it up like this. I think in order for Alabama's offense to be successful, our wide receivers have got to go to the next level. And I think you got to look at the young guys. I mentioned Malik Benson, but, looking at the pro day, Bryce had a solid, really good pro day with, Brooks and Bolden and, Burton and all those guys. But if it was me, I think Bryce's best tape or best report was with the young guys. They were young receivers. You look at his highlights last year with Kobe Prentice, Isaiah Bond. I think if it was me, if he had his choice, I think he probably would have went with the younger guys, kind of showcases those guys' skills, Kendrick Law. And I think in order for our offense to go to the next level, our receivers are going to have to be successful and be able to be interchangeable. I kind of want to talk about the downside of the pro day. I don't, being a former receiver, playing an Alabama receiver, knowing the expectations, the standard that we have. I didn't think Burton and Brooks, they really impressed me at the pro day. They were still dropping some balls. And I'm like, we shouldn't be still dropping balls at this point. With Bryce Young, this guy's an all-world, all-pro, elite arm talent. Like, I don't know why we're still having problems dropping the ball. So, that was kind of a concern for me. I thought those guys could have really, capitalized on that opportunity in front of all these NFL personnel, GMs, head coaches, and really caught the ball better. I think in order for, and it made me go to my next point, in order for Alabama offense to be successful at the receiver position, I think the best wave of talent, I mentioned Malik Benson, I think it's Isaiah Bond, I think it's Kobe Prentice, I think it's Kendrick Law, I think it's Shaz Preston, I think it's that core of guys that's really going to take our offense to the next level. I was big on the young guys last year. I thought we should have played the younger guys more, whenever those older guys were dropping passes. I'm like, just play those young guys. These guys are hungry. They're ready to play. So I hope Coach Saban does that, because in order for our offense to do that, we got to play the guys that can really get open and catch the ball consistently. So I had to bring that up about our wide receiver. Young, I know we have some freshmen, but man. And another thing, the reason everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks, Ty Simpson, Milroe, whichever one, but I think it's going to come down to receivers. Like, we can't have any more drop balls. We got to play the guys who can, who has the best technique, who's the best route runner. You look at Bond, he's working with Tyreek Hill over spring break. You look at Kobe Prentice, you look at Kendrick Law, who I think if Tommy Rees is smart, he uses him as a Debo Samuel type in the offense. But man, you look at Chaz Preston, we got freshmen coming in this year. I mean, you look at those guys, you look at Malik Benson, I think that's your best group of guys. And then you rotate in Ja'Cory Brooks and Jermaine Burton. But man, I think you got to get the receivers that separate themselves, that can win on each level, who run the best routes, who has the best hands, and who's great in space. And I think those core group of receivers led by Benson, Prentice, Bond, Law, Shaz Preston, all those guys, I think they give you kind of your best core to be successful and go to the next level offensively. So, that's what I was thinking over the weekend. That's what we talk about here at Football University. But I had to talk about those receivers, man. So let's go to the student section. He said, Saban said, yeah, Saban backlash about the freshman that got caught with the drugs. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. You got to, actions have consequences. You can choose your actions, but at the same time, you got to be able to, be okay with those consequences. So I think it's a lesson learned from all, not only this kid, but all young kids. You have a great opportunity to go to college, get your education. That's the most important thing. Don't let these, small decisions, get you sidetracked. You want to be a good citizen. You want to do the right thing. You don't want to mess up your opportunity on the field. And at the end of the day, it's about getting your education. So you got to make better decisions. Hopefully it's a lesson learned, to all of us, to make better decisions. So, but yeah, I think Coach Saban is going to handle it the way that he does. He has a way he wants to run his program. So a lot of people might say it's backlash or whatnot, but Coach Saban's going to do things his way, and he's going to discipline. He's a disciplinarian. So it is what it is. So as long as Coach Saban handles it, as long as the kid learns from it, that's what it's about. Let's see what Spencer says. He said, let's get rid of Pro Day. They showed out why they have such a problem in the regular season. That's what I said. I think, like I said, Spencer, to your point, our receivers, in order for us to go to the next level, to win the SEC championship, to compete at a high level, we got to have the right group of receivers out there going to be consistent, catching the ball, being able to separate, being able to get open, being able to play with space, open in space, and make our offense click. I don't know why they didn't get it right in the season. I don't know if they're not working on their craft or not. If they aren't, be those type players that dig deeper into your game. Always work to improve at your game. Working on your routes. Working on the mental aspect of it, watching film. Learning from the best, being a student of the game. That way, when your number's called, you go out there and perform, so you don't have these consistency issues. That's why I say you play those young guys, man. If the older guys don't want to get it, put those young guys in. We don't have time to waste. We haven't won championships the past 2 years, so we don't need to be circling the wagon. We need to be able to play the guys who are ready and shown it consistently, and that's what's going to help our offense, our quarterback. We're bringing in a young quarterback, so we can't waste time with guys who are not going to help our offense or not help our quarterback be successful. So, that's why I think it's that group of receivers that's going to take our offense to the next level. So, great point, Spencer and Jeff Stapleton. So, let's go to my next topic. So, we talked about Bryce and pro days, and I want to talk about this. And so, I know how people are going to say, listen, CJ Stroud, CJ Stroud is a better quarterback than Bryce Young. And, I get it. Here at Football University, we're open to all different types of perspectives and, different opinions, because as long as we're talking football, that's what's important. But I want to say this. Not Jahmyr Gibbs, but CJ Stroud was able to have in his 2 years, he was able to have at least 2, 3 first round, 3 or 4 first round receivers. I mean, Bryce Young really did have first round talent at the receiver position, and yet he only had what? Jamison Williams, whereas C.J. Stroud had Olave, Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Igbobi Smith, whatever. That's 4 right there compared to Bryce Young, who only had Jamison Williams, in those 2 years. And Jamison Williams, Bryce Young still won the Heisman. So to me, that's what separates Bryce Young. And I had to bring that point up because, people are going to say C.J. Stroud, which we welcome the conversation, but we just like to prove, the way the two sides, talk about everything in this dynamic. So we talked about Pro Day, and let's stay in Pro Day. Spencer has good question. He said, so Matt, are you saying everyone is great until they're getting defended? Like, listen, it is what it is. That's why I said, you have to practice with good habits, practice consistently catching the ball. So, when you do, the lights do come on, when you do get defended, you're able to excel in those situations. I think too many times in the past, we haven't had that elite level of talent at the receiver position like we did when we had Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle. We had all those guys. And to my point, all those guys were mostly freshmen when they came in. And guess what we did? We played those young guys. So I think we have to get back to the elite talent on our receiver core. And I think it's the young guys. I think it's Bond. I think it's Prentice. I think it's Law. I think it's Preston. So I think we need to play those young guys. That way we can make sure we have the best talent out there on the field, and that just makes the receiver room that much better. That Ja'Cory Brooks is going to have to step up their game. Jermaine Burton going to have to step up their game. They're going to have to be more consistent. So I think that helps our offense in the long run. But like I said, I think that next wave, that next nucleus of receivers is going to be that receiving core that takes us to the next level. So great point, Spencer. Let's see what William Bryce says. I understand players don't want to get hurt, but you make your resume is in the games. Yeah, you got to make your resume in the games, and Pro Day, I think you have to take advantage of every opportunity, in the classroom, on the field, in the locker room, doing the right things, especially playing wide receiver, man. You have to be able to win on so many different routes. And I think, like I sounded like a broken record, I think our best nucleus or wave of talent or receiving core talent is the young guys. I think it's those younger guys. I think we got guys coming up. I think we got guys coming 2 years from now. Like I said, Malik Benson, I think Malik Benson, Bond, Prentice, Kendrick Law, Preston, I think then rotate in Burton Brooks. I think that's kind of your core. But the reason I say Bond, Prentice, Malik Benson, and Kendrick Law, because I think those guys can win on more routes. I think those guys can win on different types of routes. I think those guys can win and get separation, more routes in the route tree. I think, Ja'Cory Brooks, I think, he's good. He's made so many great catches, but most of his routes seem like they're go balls or, deep in cuts, not when I don't see a lot of slant and goes or just slants or comebacks or different types of routes. So I think in order for our offense to go to the next level, our receivers, we need to play the receivers that can win on every route, that can get that separation, that can play in space, that catch the ball consistently. So I think you do that. You get that with Malik Benson, and Malik Benson's rocking the 1-1. So I think he's going to be out there to prove himself coming from JUCO. But like I said, I think those new wave of receivers, I think that's what's going to take our offense to the next level, regardless of who the quarterback. And I think the quarterback situation will figure itself out through spring training and fall camp. So, yeah, man, great comments. Thank you for that comment, Spencer. William Bryan says, I agree with you. When the quarterback throws you the ball, catch the ball. Listen, I'm not to say I had the perfect hands. I was catching at 100, receiver rate, not having drops. But, man, I've had drops, in my career. But majority of the time I made catches. Like, you knew I was going to make, you knew when your number was called, you need to make a catch. Whether it was the Arkansas game or the Tennessee game or whatever, it was too many times last year where I feel like the players just let Bryce Young down. Bryce is doing all this breaking tackles, getting guys open, and guys just drop the ball. Like, I don't understand. That is your time to make your money. You're playing with an elite level quarterback. You need to catch the ball, and as a receiver, it's all about catching the ball. Like, if you're not catching the ball, I might not have, had the best hands, but by golly, I continue to work at it. Like, I worked on juggling, hand-eye coordination, catching jugs. Like, you have to work on your craft. You look at Devontae Smith, and Devontae Smith is a great example. This guy won the Heisman. Yeah, he wasn't the biggest receiver, but what Devontae did, he can continue to develop and work on his craft. Devontae Smith would catch about 100 balls after practice. So you know what that means? And look, he's a first-round draft pick. Like, you have to put in the work and work at your craft. And I recommend that to all your kids, little kids. Do your best, make all A's, but work on your craft. Continue to work on your craft. And I feel like that's who is going to separate you to go to that next level. Working, being a student of the game, working on your routes, just being a sponge and being consistent. I think that's what's going to separate your game. So when the lights come on, you're able to make those plays. And you're not dropping the ball. You're not getting anxious or anything like that. So let's go to the we got some good comments right here. I mean, let's stay in the student section. Be ready to shine or don't. It's up to the players, not the coaches. Take Brooks in the national championship game. UGA's defense exposing. I mean, you have to look. We did not have the depth. If Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt or John Mechie doesn't get hurt in the SEC championship, maybe the outcome was different. But we recruited players too. You got to be able to call when your number's in. As Jai Hall holding, like, we did not good. We had, on top of that, we had bad play calling. We weren't running the ball. So, I think Coach Saban addressed all this, having Bill O'Brien go up to New England with Bill Belichick, doing him a solid. He's able to bring in Tommy Reese, a young offensive mind who's had to, really an offensive coach. I think, he's had to out scheme. He's had to not have all the personnel, but still be successful and be able to attack defenses with running the ball, play action, getting the guys' offenses to be successful. And I think you look at Tommy Reese, you look at the offense that he has, you look at all the weapons. I think, you look at the backfield, running the ball, us getting physical up front, getting back to running the ball to win games and passing the ball to put points on the board. So I think that's going to help separate our offense. So, yeah, it's up to the players. Spencer says our quarterbacks need to be able to throw them open, when needed. That's a good point. I hope, like I said, like I was telling those older players to continue to work on your craft. I hope our quarterback's been working on our craft, i.e. Milroe and Ty Simpson. I think they both need to continue to develop, continue to play with confidence, to continue to distribute the ball accurate, on point, and not turn the ball over. And whoever does that and gets us in the right play has the right mindset, mental disposition, psychological disposition to, when not panic, be a great leader, lead us to the promised land, get us into the right play, make each player around him better. I think that's who's going to win this quarterback position in the end. So Great point. So let's get to my next topic before we go to back to the student section. Um, so we talked about Bond, Prentice, Drew Brees, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Steve Sabille, the Panthers, Coach Saban. I want to talk about. Can we talk about the USFL? I know we have the Birmingham Stallions and Bo Scarborough. And we got a few players. I know DJ Fluker was at the Pro Day, and I think he did well. But while I'm talking about the USFL, he doesn't get an opportunity in the NFL, man. He needs to go to the USFL, man, because, listen, USFL is pretty interesting. I'm excited to see the start of the USFL. I love their quarterback. But it got me thinking, we have two former Bama players playing in the USFL. Bo Scarborough with the Birmingham Stallions and Reuben Foster. And we know how great Reuben Foster, probably one of the best linebackers that ever come through Tuscaloosa, playing with the Pittsburgh Maulers. And it got me thinking, can you imagine that one-on-one between Reuben and Bo Scarborough? Man, that's going to be a good matchup. And it made me think, man, I can't wait for that game or the USFL to get back started. So it's going to be interesting to see that type of game. So I had to shout out Reuben Foster and Bo Scarborough. So we talked about Lamar Jackson, the Pats, Bryce Young. Oh, sneaky news about Bryce Young. Joe Stapleton said, "Go Stallions will win it again this year." Yeah, I agree. You know, I think what could be great for the USFL if they kind of do it like the Premier League in soccer. I don't know if you know, but in the Premier League in soccer, you know, Manchester U, Chelsea, United, all those teams in the English Premier League soccer. The bottom teams, if they're not good, they have to get demoted to another division. So they'll basically get demoted to the USFL. If you brought this model to the NFL, then you could bring the two best teams from the USFL to play the NFL. I just thought that would be pretty cool. It got me thinking. But yeah, I just thought that was so interesting. So let's stay in the student section. I mean, y'all are rolling. Shouts out to Jeff Stapleton and Spencer. I mean, he says, you know, our quarterbacks need to be able to throw and receivers need to catch. And too many drop balls, farce us, killed us on offense, defense, call farce games. You know, false starts, you know, just the little things. You know, we got to get back to being, you know, playing with confidence, having a great scheme that put our players in the best situation. You know, like I said, I mentioned Coach Saban hiring Tommy Reese and Kevin Steele, and how I think Kevin Steele is going to, you know, set the tone defensively. We're going to be able to make adjustments. You know, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. You know, football is football. It's fun. It's about whooping your man in front of you, winning your one-on-one matchup, and having the best talent and developing that talent, like, and putting these players in situations to be successful. Listen, if you do well at that, we're going to put you on the field. So I think, you know, from that standpoint, Tommy Reese, Kevin Steele, I think Coach Saban addressed that need. And I think you'll start to see a lot of different unique names coming out of camp, spring training, I think it's going to step up. So let's stay in the student section. William Brown has a great quote right here. I understand our coach believes in keeping the same players on the field, but I also believe, as you, Spencer, you have next man up, rotate players. I agree. You know, I think it's all about, you know, playing the best players. You know, listen, you know, if you've been doing it in practice, you know, you get to the game, and I kind of see the same thing. Like, this is the SEC. If I'm Coach Saban, listen, I don't have time to be wasted. Like, it's about being dominant, being the best. Let's score points. Let's win. You know, like, I think we have to get back to that offensively and defensively. And, like I said, I don't think we need to be showing loyalty to the older players. I think Saban's got to get back to just playing the best player. I don't care who it is. I don't care if he's a freshman. If the older guys are not getting it done, play those young guys, man. Those young guys, they're hungry. I mean, that's the time to play them because you put defenses on the heels and they don't know what the young guys can do. So I'm like, listen, play the young guys. Play the young guys. So I agree with you. Spencer says, everybody hit the like, subscribe. Lord needs to keep Matt Lynn alive. Thank you. So yeah, let's get to my last few topics. So we talked about Benson, Alabama receivers, Prode, Gibbs, Texas, Jameson Williams. We talked just about everything. But I did want to talk about this, and I thought, this was an interesting point to bring it back to Alabama. But before we get there, Cindy Reed has a great comment. She said, let's get back to bully ball. I agree with you, Cindy. Let's get back to bully ball, and I keep bringing back to Coach Saban, being in that national championship, watching Georgia win their second national championship in the form or fashion that they wanted. They were able to run the ball to win the game, and they were able to pass it to put points up. So, I think it's important that we're able to do that. I talked about you've heard me go on the rant about the receivers, who I think we need to play, what core we need to be working with. But I think we need to be able to run the ball, get back to bully the ball. I think Saban's addressing that. I think Tommy Reese is going to kind of be like a Kyle Shanahan type, run the ball, being physical up front, pounding it. You got to run the ball to win games and win championships, and you pass the ball to put up points. And so, I think Alabama's got to get back to that type of style, and I think they will with Tommy Reese's leadership. I think he's the type of young mind, I think, that's creative. He's going to look at all the talent that we have, and he's going to put these players in the right position, and we're going to run the ball to win and score. So, and he's a great developer at quarterback, so that's going to help our quarterback race. So, Jeff Saban brought up a good question. What are your thoughts about Jason McClellan? I really think Jason McClellan is a really talented running back out of Texas. I thought Bill O'Brien didn't find how good Jason McClellan was until, the 8th game of the season last year. I think he should have just kept feeding Jason McClellan when we needed those running situations, especially running it up the middle. What you're getting from Jahmyr Gibbs, passing, quick game stuff, outside zones, those type of things. But I think we didn't find Jason McClellan until later in the season where we could just run in between the tackles. And I think that's the type of offense Coach Saban wants to be able to do. We talked about bully ball, controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the clock, keeping the defense off the field, being able to run the ball downfield. But I think Jason McClellan is an amazing talent. I think he's got good speed and size, but he's going to have to come with it because you look at Jamarian Miller, you look at Justice Hayes, Richard Young, all those guys coming in. They're going to be competing for that spot, and I think he's going to be, I think he's going to have to be a great leader to show these guys how to do it, and he's going to be all ready for it. So it's going to be interesting to see, the different types of running backs that we use. I do think we do use 4 running backs. You look at McClellan, you look at Miller, you look at Justice Hayes, and I think probably a Richard Young gets in that rotation that will, be successful for us. So great points, Jeff Stapleton. Let's see. So let's stay in the student section. Matt, what's the number one thing Bama has to do to be scared of everyone? I think you're talking about the identity of Alabama. I think Alabama, to its point, I think we got to be back dominant defense. I think we just got to be more physical of a style of play. Like I feel like last year we were missing too many tackles on defense. We were too soft at key positions up front at the linebacker position. Like we had nobody being physical, coming in, being tenacious, being physical, having that mindset. And I think once Alabama does that, whether it's you have to do that, and it starts up front, offensive line, defensive line, we got to get back to being physical. And I think that's what's going to kind of put the fear back in those teams where they're like, dang, man, we got to play this Alabama team. We know it's going to be a long 60 minutes because Alabama can whoop you for 60 minutes. So I think if we get back to being physical, running the ball, hitting people in the mouth on defense, not making mental mistakes, and coaches putting these players in the best position and developing them and having energy and enthusiasm, I think that's what's going to make us so successful. So great point, Spencer. William Bryan says, offense, you ain't getting this ball. Defense, I'm taking the ball. Yeah, that's what I say. You got to be able to have balance, running the ball, passing the ball. You know, we're just going to be able to keep defenses on heels. Like, if you're not going to stop this one play, we're going to keep running it down your throat, until you stop it. And then if you try to stop it, we're going to pass it. We're just going to put points. But I think what Coach Saban wants to do is get back to the offensive style control of the game. Yeah, we could put up all these points, but we weren't controlling the clock. We weren't keeping the defense off the field. So I think Coach Saban wants to make sure he controls the line of scrimmage, controls the game, wears defenses down, keep his defense off the field, and we put points on the board. And I think that's the remedy. That's what got Coach Saban 6 national championships. I think he's going to get back to that with Tommy Rees. I think Tommy Rees understands that. I think he makes common sense, running the ball, play calling, effective play calls for our offense to be successful. So great point, William Bryant. Yeah, we already know about Bill O'Brien. This guy had no clue when to run the ball or when to pass it. I think he was just set in his ways. That's just how it is. I think that was a lesson learned that, hindsight 2020, if Coach Saban could go back in the time machine, he probably say, listen, I need to find a receiver. Not a receiver, but a quarterback or offensive coordinator before last year. But you live and you learn. So I think Coach Saban, made the best with this situation. We didn't win the national championship the past 2 years, but I think, he's able to make the decisions and bring in Kevin Steele and Tommy Rees to kind of set that Alabama identity back. So great point, Spencer. Let's get to a few more. Defense has to step up and punch teams in the mouth. The heart of a team, Bama needs to find their heart. Yeah, and I think, finding their heart, hitting people in the mouth, that's the type of coach Kevin Steele is. He's a rah-rah, emotional motivator, enforcer type of guy. So he's going to have you knowing what to do, being in the right place, flying around, and hitting people in the mouth. So that's the type of coach Kevin Steele is. Let's get to this next comment. Matt, are you saying that our defense is how we get back? What's Alabama football is known for the past historically? You look at Alabama football, is run the ball and hit people in the mouth. You look at Copeland, even back to the Bear Bryant days, Barry Krause, all those guys. Running the ball, Johnny Davis, Musso, Tony Nathan, running the ball and hitting people in the mouth. That's what you think about Alabama football, and it's physical. We have the elephants for a reason as a mascot because we're physical, we're tenacious, we run over people, we want to run the ball. Like, that's what Alabama brand is known for. So we got to make sure we keep that brand and be able to score points and put up points with our weapons, our receivers. So you got to run the ball, you got to control the line of scrimmage, you got to control the clock. Like Spencer says, running game controls the clock. You control the clock, you put up points, you get first downs, you keep the defense off the fields, and you win the game. So let's get to a few more while we wind it down. Spencer says, where do you really see Bryce going? I'm going to give you my prediction. I see Bryce going to Charlotte, North Carolina, where he will be a Carolina Panther. I think the Carolina Panthers, I think the ownership, I think they really like Bryce Young, and I just think that's going to be where he's going to end up. So I think Bryce, I told you I think he's going to, if once he gets in that NFC South division, I think he's going to have a Drew Brees type of impact in that division. I think Bryce Young can bring Carolina a Super Bowl, maybe two. So it'd be so interesting to see. So great topics here at Football University. Thank you for tuning in. Shouts out to the student section. You guys were amazing. William Bryant, Spencer, Jeff Stapleton, Lori Caddell, Cindy Reed, 6-0, Nick Saban Jr. Nick Saban Jr. has a special teams podcast, by the way, so shouts out to that. So, I mean, we're going to have a crazy football weekend. We're going to continue to talk about the draft. We're going to continue to talk about Bryce Young. And listen, you never know. Lamar Jackson might be with another team this time next week. So, either way, we're going to talk about it here at Football University. We're going to talk Alabama football. So, thanks for tuning in. This has been another episode of Football University here with me, Matt Caddell. But meet me back next Monday, same place, same time, where we talk anything and everything football. All right. I love you guys. Have a great weekend. Peace.